So racism and anti-Semitism issues are really thrown around a lot in the modern media. I can tell you from experience that I am Jewish, and the worst period for me in terms of anti-Semitism was in college, because people would basically just say whatever the fuck they wanted to, and they'd throw loose change at you, like, oh, you want to, because they'd be like, oh, you're so cheap, you'd pick up basically loose change. So that was pretty much, that happened literally all the time for me in college. And yeah, I think despite that, it was college in general was a good experience, at least in terms of getting to know a lot of people. So I was able to, you know, get beyond that. It wasn't really that big of an issue after probably, I would say at one point it bothered me a lot. And I got into a real confrontation with a friend of mine who would do that to me. And unfortunately, I think it's being used now, the issue of anti-Semitism, just like the issues of racism, just like other issues of identity politics, are being used as a political football by the right and the left in order to, play around with people's emotions and motivate them to support certain causes that don't necessarily have much to do with them. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made this tweet 2 days ago, I believe. Yeah, it was 4 days ago now. It's saying, asking to be considered a refugee and applying for status isn't a crime. It wasn't for Jewish families fleeing Germany. It wasn't for targeted families fleeing Rwanda. It wasn't for communities fleeing war-torn Syria, and it isn't for those fleeing violence in Central America. So, of course, she's doing this. She's replying. She's taking the bait to get into an issue that she doesn't really have an answer for. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an open borders person, and she's also she's in the news all the time now. All the time for all the wrong reasons. So, yeah, I am going to have to react to this one. So I would say this, okay? When my grandparents, they were kicked out of Iraq, and they they ended up having to leave. They weren't refugees in the sense that they were voluntarily leaving their own country in order to go to a different country because of they were forced out of the country. They were literally kicked out of the country, and they had to. In fact, in the event, they did settle in Israel. But yeah, in the case of Ukraine, my grandparents were actually, it was only my grandpa had to flee to the Soviet Union. He was basically from Ukraine, but he had to flee further east into the Soviet Union in order to escape the Germans. That was refugee status. He technically wasn't crossing any borders, though, because he was already in the Soviet Union. But yeah, there are parallels to that. But you weren't seeing people basically kicking down fences and throwing stones at border guards and demanding to be let in. And the other issue is that what's the motivation for leaving Honduras? People in Honduras are not being basically chased around and shot in the streets by the Honduran government. There were issues in Honduras about, I want to say 2 years, no, maybe it was, I think it was almost 2 years ago. It was almost 2 years ago that the Honduran government was, they basically rigged an election there. There's a right-wing government in Honduras, and they rigged an election there, and there were massive riots, and I think 36 people were killed. And yeah, there's definitely problems in Honduras, but you're not seeing this massive persecution that would drive people to the U.S. borders. It just doesn't work that way. It hasn't been that way at all in Central America. The main reason people like the ones that are in the inlet here we'll just click on it. This is that crazy photo that people keep showing, but the photo doesn't. You can see people over here facing the border fence, just standing there and looking at it. You can see that this is a whole array of people. You don't see any of them running. There's one person running over here, but there's an entire file of people who you don't see any of them in a running profile. Okay, you would know that. It's pretty. You see one person running over there. It's basically everybody can see that. You know, that's really the focus on the people in the foreground, while the people in the background don't really make any sense of the photo. And I think a lot of people have already analyzed this and decided that this photo doesn't really represent what's going on there. It could actually be a staged lie, in my opinion, and such things have happened before. And to compare this to any of the three conflicts and persecutions that she's talking about shows how much of a superficial thinker Ocasio-Cortez is, because you're not seeing entire communities and ethnic groups slaughtered like in Rwanda, which I think Rwanda is one of the most forgotten genocides in the world. People don't talk about Rwanda. I mean, there was the movie Hotel Rwanda with Don Cheadle, and you know, I've seen a number of documentaries about it, but no, it is really one of the most forgotten genocides in the history of genocides. Syria, of course, is very different. You do see a lot of issues of why exactly is this conflict just it's just continuing, mostly because foreign countries are intervening, whether it's the United States, whether it's Russia, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Qatar. So she knows it's not really the issue is not having to let entire people. Here it says communities fleeing war torn. It's not. They're not fleeing as communities. That's ridiculous. There's villages in Syria that are divided between different religious communities. So, and then on the other hand, there are ones that are entirely composed of certain religious communities. So she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. The Jewish families fleeing Germany thing. You didn't see people on the boats rioting at Ellis Island when they were, I think it was the USS St. Louis came here and they were denied entry. But there was no riot the way that there is at the border today. And I think that this tweet from Lindsey Graham, you know, I think he's correct. I think Lindsey Graham is kind of he is a grandstander. I think he's a warmonger. I don't think that Lindsey Graham is a good senator. People are talking a lot about the Lindsey Graham 2.0 with the tie and everything. Everybody knows that meme. We'll show it. Lindsey Graham. Yeah, everybody remembers this. So, yeah, that was a very nice moment in the midst of a career of him voting for corporate welfare, voting for massive amounts of foreign aid. I don't particularly like Lindsey Graham for his policies. I don't know him as a person. Maybe he's a good guy. Maybe Ocasio-Cortez, I don't think she's a bad person. I think that really we're taking this all very personally. And therefore, these people are able to use this issue. Ocasio-Cortez used the Holocaust, used the Rwandan genocide, my God, in order to justify her incoherent border policy. And Lindsey Graham uses that in order to score points on her and talk about. And by the way, I think Lindsey Graham, he is a very far right conservative Christian. So I think he's consistent with his beliefs on this. I just think that where his beliefs have led us is not where I want to be. I want us to be, we're going to get to that. I want us to be a country where we have friends instead of clients. We have friends who we do business with, and we don't have countries that are basically under our thumb and or that are basically controlling us through the back door through all sorts of financial networks or everything. And Lindsey Graham is helping that happen. He's helping. He's making it harder for America to be really a force for good in the world by limiting our military expeditions and keeping us out of conflicts that we have no business being in. He wants us to be in those conflicts because that's his philosophy. So no, I don't like Lindsey Graham, but I think he was right on that comment. So Ocasio-Cortez writes back. She says, the point of such a treasured museum is to bring its lessons to present day. This administration has jailed children and violated human rights. Perhaps we should stop pretending that authoritarianism and violence is a historical event instead of a growing force. Talking about imprisoning children is basically, it's conflating different things, okay? In the Holocaust, you didn't have children being housed. You would have people, if these were the death camps, you would have people that would get there in the cattle cars. They'd be brought out. They'd be separated from the children, and the children would go straight to the gas chambers. Has that happened in the United States? No, it hasn't. Is family separation occurring? Yes. Does family separation occur when people get arrested for regular process crimes here in the crimes of skipping bail, crimes of what happens when you arrest somebody for public intoxication? Do they get to bring their kids? It's ridiculous. There is no parallel. It's basically, she is really out of her gourd. And I think this really is a show that we're in an era of WWE type politics. Basically, people jumping from the top rope, trying to land on the other person, and the other person is down there, maybe trying to roll out of the way. That's the politics that we're in. We're not addressing issues of the public debt. We're not addressing. We're barely addressing the issue of criminal justice. We're not addressing the issue of ending corporate welfare to large corporations, or ending these subsidies of ethanol, ending all of this, this overregulation of certain industries. It's not being addressed. Now, some of it's being addressed in the executive branch, but really, when we elect people like Ocasio-Cortez and Lindsey Graham to the Senate and the House, we're seeing really this conversation between people who obviously don't want to compromise on anything. They don't have any common ground on the issues they're talking about. So what are they getting done? In reality, behind our backs, they are getting done pieces of legislation that do betray the people. I think that if Lindsey Graham would put more effort into building the border wall, which I think is good, that would be better. If Lindsey Graham put more effort into issues of reforming the tax code, issues of ending civil asset forfeiture, issues of extending concealed carry rights throughout the country, that is something that we would be able to celebrate. I don't see anything worth celebrating Lindsey Graham for, and that includes this fantastic tie photo. Yes, the tie photo is hilarious, but I refuse to believe he's changed as a person. And Ocasio-Cortez, I just don't agree with her on anything. But the fact is that I can accept not agreeing with somebody. I will not accept somebody, however, who is basically going and using, issues that, my family was definitely affected by the Holocaust. Most of my dad's family was wiped out. He talks about it extensively. My dad does, about his dad was the person who was in it, both of his parents, in fact. And it's a very important issue for him. For me, I've kind of moved beyond it, but who keeps re-injecting this issue into the public discourse? It is people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It is the ADL, by the way, which on many issues is at odds with Ocasio-Cortez. So who gets the right to bring up the Holocaust? Is it Ocasio-Cortez? Is it Lindsey Graham? Is it the ADL? I would say that they're all abusing this historical event for their own purposes. And I would agree with a lot of the people. They're out there, even some of the edgier people who I probably wouldn't get along with, that it is an event that's been exploited for the wrong reasons. Now, there are two people who have been accused in the past few days of anti-Semitism. And I think that we'll do this guy first. This is Mark Lamont Hill, and I think he is a piece of crap. I don't respect him very much at all, but I don't consider this necessarily anti-Semitism so much as very big. I don't know why his name is just flashing at the top here, but basically he did effectively call for. So this is not technically anti-Semitism, but it is him saying something that effectively calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. So he said, speaking at the UN's International Day of Solidarity, and I did watch the video, International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People, an annual anti-Israel hate. So this is the conservative review. This is what they think. Now, this is the UN. They have the right to host this ceremony. I wouldn't attend the ceremony, but this conservative review calls it a hate fest, and that it might very well be. Okay, it might very well be that. In his speech before the United Nations in New York City, the CNN personality explicitly endorsed violent Palestinian actions against Israel. Hill said the international community must allow the Palestinian Arabs to use any methods necessary to resist Israel, implying that violence against Israel is legitimate. Israel National News reports, justice requires a free Palestine from the river to the sea, Hill said, endorsing an annihilationist slogan meant to convey that the state of Palestine should take place, the place of the current nation of Israel. Now, let me see here. I don't see if there's the video here. If they're not posting the video, I don't know what the hell they want from us. Here we go. It's on Twitter.
Action. Grassroots to commit to political action. Grassroots action. Local action. And international action that will give us what justice requires. And that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you for your time.
So Mark Lamont Hill, I'll tell you why I disrespect him so much. And I don't give a shit if you. So Mark Lamont Hill. So it has nothing to do with Palestine. There was a pants up challenge a few years ago, and he kind of. Here we go. You'll see it.
Black men and sagging? The Pull Your Damn Pants Up Challenge, date with Mark Lamont guest, with CNN, the ALSI Pull Your Pants Up Challenge creator as well as CNN guest Tara Setmer, who is a contributor on Rush Limbaugh's Blaze TV. We all know that sagging pants.
I don't know why you can't find it anywhere. Let's see if it's here. Can't believe I'm looking at a. This is from Bossip. Maybe you can't find it. Jeez. I think this video has been removed from YouTube. So basically there was a. So sorry about that previous video. That movie has been removed, but Mark Lamont Hill at one point went off on a guy who had a pull your pants up challenge because he thought that teaching black people, black people teaching other black people that sagging your pants shows that you might be gang affiliated, which it could be. That sends the wrong message, and it encourages police to profile people for sagging their pants. Mark Lamont Hill is a fucking moron. And he kind of went and, let me see here. He kind of got roasted over the coals over this. But I still would say that this is an example, just like with Cindy Hyde-Smith, of somebody being a dumbass, not being racist or being anti-Semitic. And he starts saying, at no point did I endorse, support, or even mention Hamas, which I think is true. He says he critiqued Syria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia in his remarks too. But this is the difference, okay? I would say it's fine if you critique Israel. It's fine if you critique Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Syria. But the fact of the matter is that those countries are with the exception of Egypt possibly, more violent than in Israel. Syria for sure is more violent. And yet he doesn't call it for replacing Syria in order to accomplish some sort of cosmic justice. So I would say that he's out of his fucking mind. He's an idiot. He's basically like a lot of progressive chatterboxes. He's obsessed with the Palestine conflict. And yeah, he did call for its destruction. Somebody called him out, said, and you called for the destruction of Israel, shameful. He said, that's absurd. I called for freedom and equal rights for all citizens, irrespective of race, religion, class, gender, or sexual identity. No one should have greater or fewer rights and privileges in a democracy. It's simple. No, what he's saying is, okay, if you look at Palestine map, so this is what's taken to be Palestine. Okay, this is even from so Palestine is considered this area between Egypt and Jordan. So the sea is this, and the river is the River Jordan, between the Sea of the Galilee and the Dead Sea. So what he's basically saying is all the area between here and here should be a free Palestine. Why is it called Palestine in this map? Because under every ruler since the I would say the 2nd century, it's been called Palestine. Prior to that, it was called Judea. It was called, there were parts of it, the Galilee, for example, and it was called Israel. Various parts of it are called different names. But Palestine is a name given to it by Roman rulers as a reference to the Philistine peoples that had lived there, hundreds of years before the Romans even got there. So, yeah, Mark Lamont Hill is basically obsessed with this issue, even though what possible contribution can he make to solving the issue? Nothing. And but I don't think it's an anti-Semitism issue. I think it's an issue of somebody just being a dumbass. Now, Senator Paul, I think everybody that follows my channel knows that I'm a huge supporter of Ron Paul. I'm Ron Paul and Rand Paul. Although Ron Paul, I think in recent years, he's gotten a little too. He's much more anti-interventionist than I am. I would say that he is the real isolationist, if you want to really parse words about it. His son Rand Paul is more of a non-interventionist in my book, and it says here Senator Paul places hold on U.S. security assistance to Israel. And the Washington Free Beacon put out a story yesterday claiming that they were exposing him for putting a block on the aid. I would like to say this. Thanks to the way that they opened my eyes, I realized that the Paul family opened my eyes. Ron Paul and Rand Paul. I realized that foreign aid is not a good way to have a relationship with any country. People like to say that without U.S. foreign aid, Israel would be dead, or other countries. There's other countries we could give foreign aid to. For example, South Korea and the Philippines, Egypt we give a lot of foreign aid to. The more we give foreign aid to these countries, the more they become dependent. The more they expect it, and they basically build bureaucracies. They build a lot of wasteful, bureaus around they build it around this expectation that they're going to get the same amount of foreign aid or more year on year. So in reality, we're making the problem much worse. And what happens with this foreign aid? What happens? Does anybody ever ask that? The people who oppose this block on foreign aid, and they say we need more and more foreign aid. Well, you realize that when the foreign aid is delegated to the Israelis or it's delegated to the Egyptians, the United States has the right to go to this foreign country. And we're talking about Israel in this case, and say, we need you to do this. So when they then bellyache about how the U.S. is asking for concessions about this and releasing prisoners or everything, it doesn't matter how unjust you feel and how ridiculous the demand is that you're talking about. Once you receive foreign aid, technically the U.S. has the right to demand that type of stuff. I'm not saying that they can enforce that demand, but I am saying that that demand does have a rationale to it, because you don't give people something for nothing. People like to talk about a special relationship between the state of Israel and America. But even special relationships involve a give and take. And this smear article, not this one specifically, but there was a smear article put out by the Washington Free Beacon in order to twist Senator Paul's arm and tell him to let the aid go to Israel. And I will say this. I stand with Rand on this issue. Senator Paul is doing what no other politician will do. And that's be a true friend and stand up and say, these aid-based relationships are not real friendships. These aid-based relationships actually make this interaction between the USA and Israel codependent. It makes it something of, expectations on the part of each other that are not realistic. We cannot continue to give foreign aid in the form of corporate welfare, which we send to Israel, and they spend in order to procure arms from our corporations when their economy is big enough now, and I'm going to say this, their economy is big enough now in order to purchase their arms should they need it without the need for foreign aid. Then the United States wants to extract concessions from them. They want to extract release of prisoners from them. If people have a problem with any of that, I think this relationship needs to completely change. And therefore, I think that you would finally have, if you eliminate the foreign aid, if you eliminate these demands for negotiations, you eliminate these demands for prisoner exchanges, you would finally have the chance, the possibility for good faith negotiations between Israelis and their neighbors, as well as a true independent Jewish state in the Middle East, and to basically exist as it wants, and possibly even peace with the Palestinians. But you cannot do it when you continue to have this relationship that I think is how many more years can it keep going on? How many more years can this aid keep being distributed? This is my opinion. This is the opinion of somebody who served in Israel in the army. And I stand with Senator Paul, and I am not going to back AIPAC. I think that they have done enough damage. So that's about it. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my other channel, Razor Ray Live Wounds, for live streams for the time being until live streaming is restored to this channel. Also, please tip me in the Patreon below. The link is below in the description, just like everything else. And comment when the video uploads. And have a fantastic Thursday. I will see you tomorrow.